Our next story, and we will take a break after this, but our next story is from John Patrick Higgins, and it's a chapter from a novel that he's writing called Alone Again, Naturally. He's a playwright. His greatest achievement as a child was growing an 11-foot high sunflower for which he won a prize at school. That's quite an achievement. Okay, so please, big warm hand for Silvia from John Patrick Higgins.
It was a very big sunflower. I lay still in the darkness. I felt I had been the subject of a sophisticated experiment. My eyes were wide and drank in the gloom as I tried to focus on the fuzzy, busy objects that circled my head like a halo of flies. I breathed in dead leaves and desiccated insects which settled like dust in a crypt. This was not my beautiful mouth. This was not my beautiful tongue. I ran the latter over the former. It was dry and smooth, a snake's belly sliding over ruins. What had happened? I shifted my wooden limbs, and something rolled off the bed and fell with a muted clunk onto the carpet. Was it a leg? No, it was a bottle. And then I remembered. It had been Christmas Day, and I had been drinking. I got to my feet and padded to the bathroom and ran my mouth under the cold tap. Life sprung up as though on a dusty alien world, my terraplane tongue blooming, becoming flexible and exploratory, the roof of my mouth smooth again. I coughed and my voice returned in yaps. I spat into the sink and tannin sediment colored the saliva like sick blood. I was alive. I felt I had been beaten about the head and neck with a wet rope, but I was alive. I resolved to fry an egg in butter and open a can of fat Coke. It was the only way I would survive this. It was Boxing Day. I had survived another Christmas alone, but this was to be a sterner test. Boxing Day in company. It was the day of my annual visit to my Aunt Silvia. Silvia lived in 3 rooms of a large house on the other side of town. When she was younger, she had red hair and studied ballet, and I think her 60s had been mildly bohemian. She had been married to an airline pilot, and there were rumors that she entertained gentlemen callers during his long-haul flights. The family was scandalized. She'd become a sort of low-rent Princess Margaret in her household mythology. Now I was all that was left of the family, and I wasn't scandalized. I was traumatized. I was going to have to drive across town. I drank coffee. I brushed my teeth. I vomited. I brushed my teeth again. I dressed and sprayed myself with a lot of deodorant. Pressing my head against the cool glass of the front door, I stared into the grey glow of the day. Pushing outside, I made it as far as the car, applying my hands and cheek to its freezing flanks. I let myself in, dulling the mirror with my breath, starting her up. I made it 50 yards down the road before pulling over and heading back on foot to the house to see if I had closed the front door, which I hadn't. I strolled back to the car, which was shivering in clouds of condensation, the driver's door still open. As I drove, I let my hands and feet do everything. I did not engage at all. I knew that if my brain blundered into proceedings, there would be a major traffic incident. It would have been like one of those moments of frozen confusion I encountered typing up my notes, where my brain overtook my hands and I no longer knew where the semicolon key was. Besides, I was already using my brain to sustain a gentle, fizzing panic. I scanned the landscape for signs of the police, squinting at dark shapes in the cold eye of the rear-view mirror. I wouldn't have driven ordinarily. I'd been asleep and drunk an hour ago and clearly failed a breathalyzer test. But I was late and it was Boxing Day, and I imagined the traffic would be quiet and the police, basically human beings, would want to be at home with their families. Of course, there were probably policemen like me who had no families and were more likely to be vindictive because they're working during the holidays and nobody loved them. So I kept a constant paranoid surveillance while my hands and feet got on with the job of actually not killing somebody. It worked. I got to Silvia's house 10 minutes after I said I would, and I had not been arrested. Christ, you smell like a brewery. I released Silvia from my embrace. She was brittle and neat, her hair still suspiciously red, her face caked in powder. She wore a baby blue cardigan, pearl earrings, and her eyes were fierce in the gypsum mask of her face. She'd left an imprint in dust on the front of my raincoat, like the Veronica. I can't believe you drove. You stink like a dosser. Thanks very much, I said. I smell death on you. Charming as ever, though you're probably right. I'm properly on my last legs now. I draped my coat over the end of the banister and she picked it up with a tut and placed it on the coat stand and, with a tissue retrieved from her sleeve, attempted to scrub the face powder from my lapel with her spit. I went straight into the kitchen, put on her pinny, and 5 minutes later I was crushing fennel seeds in a mortar and pestle. She appeared armed with 2 large tumblers of gin and tonic and 2 small paper hats. We've been doing this every year for the last decade when she had got back in touch after Mum's funeral. Our family had always been small, but by the time I'd reached my 40s, it had dwindled to nothing. Silvia had a son in Australia whom she had fallen out with, and I had a couple of cousins in America I had never met. Silvia's husband and my parents were long gone, so this was it. Every Boxing Day I came to our house to cook a chicken, which was the only thing I cooked well, and then we got drunk in front of the telly. After dinner, the bickering would start, and my character would be swiftly atomized, and I would threaten to leave, but I never did because she kept a good cellar and my house was miles away. So I took the constructive criticism until she fell asleep with her mouth open. I fished her loose false teeth out so she wouldn't choke and placed them on the coffee table in front of her. And then I drank quietly on my own, watching the TV with the sound down. Every year for a decade we did this. I didn't mind. She never remembered the harshness of her criticism, or did she? There was always a faint embarrassment in the morning. She could remember something, but she wasn't ever sure what it was. I zested a lemon. Are you seeing anyone? Said Silvia. That question comes earlier every year, I said. You usually wait until at least I've finished eating. That's a no, then. Yes, that's a no. She prodded me in the belly. It's because of this, she said. Do you want me to continue cooking you a dinner? I don't actually have to do this. I could be at home right now nursing a bad hangover. I'm not being cruel, Paul. I say it because I love you. I stopped zesting and looked at her. You love me? I have to. You're my last relation. You've got a son. He's a little shit. I shook my head. No, Silvia, I'm not seeing anyone. I expect you've missed the boat by now, she said sadly. I chopped the garlic. Dinner was civilized. We drank Pinot Grigio with the bird and listened to a CD of hymns sung by the King Singers. The conversation was polite, if a bit dull. Neither of us did much of note, and we had few common interests, so there were lengthy gaps, which was fine. We knew each other. The silences were comfortable, and the chicken was good, so there was no need for chat. The paper hats rustled as we chewed, shivering like butterfly wings over our heads. After dinner, we watched the television. It was an evolved experience, a well-worn rut. Silvia was old and thin and felt the cold, so the heating was blasting. She was slightly deaf, so the TV was blasting. The adverts on the commercial channels punishingly so. She narrated each program, often over expository passages, which she found boring, so I was briefed on the action we had both just been watching, but by the middle of the film we had no idea what was going on. She had a memory for faces, but not for names. So every time a new person appeared on screen, I was asked, "Who is he? I know him." On any occasion that I was able to answer, she disagreed with me. "Don't be so stupid, he has a much thinner face." She sat bewildered at the end credits when it was revealed that I was correct, wondering how I'd managed to pull off this feat of legerdemain. My favourite questions from the evening's viewing were, "Who is that actor who always reminds me of Jack Lemmon?" And when Juliet Stevenson appeared on screen, she seemed genuinely angered. I never found out why. "She knows why," was all she gave me. I was sometimes unable to worry out the name of each actor she was thinking of on demand, though some of the actors didn't actually appear on screen, their memory being prompted by the appearance of somebody else. It was like playing a game of Guess Who twice removed. She was always disappointed when I couldn't place the mystery person. "You used to be good at this," she said, as though there was a point in time when I could gaze into her mind and map out her thought process from no information. And of course she was right. There was a time when I could do exactly that. I was depressed after the death of my parents, and I briefly moved in with Silvia, whom I hadn't seen for years. I'm not sure whose idea it had been, and I soon moved out again, as we both quickly realised it had been a mistake. But after a month of intense scrutiny of the box, I could accurately map out whole evenings of Silvia's idiosyncratic and active television watching. Her latest assertion was that Americans couldn't do collars. "What do you mean Americans can't do collars?" "Look," she said, as Jimmy Stewart put his foot up in Rear Window. "Look at his collar. Rubbish. He's not meant to look smart. He's a grouchy down-at-hill photographer with a broken leg. No, they look bad, all of them. It's the collars. It's just the collars." I knew what this was. These were the symptoms of loneliness. Silvia was always alone. Watching the television was a bonding opportunity. Films were not entertainment in and of themselves. It was springboards to a larger narrative. They were a stepping-off point. They included me. My aunt knew something I was good at, perhaps the only thing I was good at, naming obscure actors, and wanted me to impress her. When she recapped the start of the story over the middle of the story, so ultimately she had no idea what was going on at the end of the story, it didn't matter. That was not the point. I would know what was happening. I could read a film. She knew this. That night she slept upright on the sofa, her head thrown back as though seized with laughter. I removed her glasses. Her teeth had come loose, drawing in and out with each sonorous snore, peeping like a cat's tongue. I removed them and placed them beside her glasses on the coffee table. I fetched a blanket, draped it over her, and continued to watch old films on her TV, drinking her wine in silence as I had done every Boxing Day for the past decade. When I finally went to bed, I kissed her on the forehead. In my family, we showed affection only when the other person didn't know. The fight seems to have left her in the last couple of years. She was merely past remarkable now, no longer devastating. There were a few early jabs, and then for the rest of the evening, she was almost companionable. It worried me. She wasn't herself. In the morning, as always, she betrayed no hint of the previous night's successes. She was bright and neat, with just the tiniest edge in her manner, as though she was expecting bad news. "I'm going to go," I said. "I expect you're busy," she said. She knew I wasn't busy. "Same time next year," I said. "If you like, if I'm still clinging to life." "You're like liching on a rock, Silvia. Nothing's going to scrape you off." We hugged stiffly. When I got in, I took my jacket off, and there once again was the powdery outline of her face pressed onto my lapel. There was the ghost of a smile.